Welcome to another episode of the Skytale Insights podcast. I'm Annie, president of Skytale, and so excited to be here today with Niklass, who is founder and CEO of Medvelle, which is an inventory and procurement management system. And also Judy, our very own Judy from Skytale, who leads our aesthetic medicine, plastic surgery, and wellness practice on our consulting side. So thrilled to have you both here to talk about potentially the unglamorous, but also the very important world of procurement and inventory and management and sales. But before we dive in, I'd love to, maybe Niklass, you could just share a little bit about Medvelle and what you all do.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me on. We're obviously passionate about this topic, right? Inventory, even if it's not the most glamorous part of running a practice, but definitely a necessary one. So Thank you for having me. Excited to talk about this today. And congratulations on what you guys are doing in the space. That's one that's nice to see and definitely much needed. Well, actually, the way that Medvelle started, I come from 4 generations of doctors. So my mother owns her own aesthetic practice, moved to the US and joined a family office. And we were looking to buy a bunch of med spas and medical practices, and very quickly realized that inventory is such a nightmare. Something that is not easy to do, but the most successful practices are the ones that do a really good job at it, and the ones that are not so successful are typically ones struggling with it. Yeah. And so we set out to build a solution that automates the entire inventory for a practice in one place. You can think about us kind of like the Amazon of the aesthetic space. So it's a one-stop shop where clients buy everything they need from injectables over retail to the snacks that the team likes to use. And beyond just buying it from one place, it also tracks that inventory all in one place and does all of the financial work around it, right? Yeah. Accrued cost of goods sold, reconciliation, matching, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And we've seen the space grow. We've been very blessed to be very well received in the space, and are now, really excited to start to have these kinds of conversations as a company.
Well, fun. Yeah. Well, we can just scrap the agenda because I'd love to know, the snacks that the most successful medical aesthetics companies are ordering.
You'll see there's funny differences between states, what's ordered in the north versus in the south.
Yeah. I imagine. Snacks and then, maybe not so much.
That's it.
Fun. Well, thank you. That's wonderful to hear. And I think we all are so fortunate to work in an industry that's just continues to grow at such a high pace. And that, keeps us on our toes to move quickly, but is also really a privilege. But, potentially starting with you, Judy, because, as a consultant, one of the first things you do coming into a practice is oftentimes a diagnostic, right? Mm-hmm. So I know we have practice owners who come to us with like acute, I need your help with this. And sometimes it's, how can I just run my business better? When you go into a practice, how often is inventory coming up as an issue?
Pretty much every time.
Really?
Yeah, it's honestly, it shouldn't be as hard as it seems, but it really affects, it's not just operational, mm-hmm. It affects the margins in a big way. It affects cash flow on a monthly basis, and really where it really starts to show up is when practices start to grow and scale. Yeah. It just gets out of control.
Yeah. You have one practice and it's okay, but you multiply that by 5 and then you multiply that by 10 and suddenly a smaller problem turns significant.
Right.
Yeah.
Things start to break, right?
Yeah.
As you scale, the things that worked when you were a single injector, right? Maybe out of a suite is not feasible anymore once you have a big team, and the level of controls required and so on are critical. And then I think you also need to look into the future where you want to go, right? I mean, you guys help a lot of practices to kind of take that next step. Mm-hmm. That's also a big piece. What works today is not going to work tomorrow anymore.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's a really good point in terms of like what is breaking. And that's oftentimes, probably for both of our companies, when things break is when we get calls. And, we see things break around like 3 locations and then you have 5. Like there's sort of these inflection points. When you see things start to break from an inventory or procurement standpoint, kind of what starts to break down?
Honestly, the biggest thing that we see is the miscommunication between what we're using mm-hmm. and what shows up on the P&L. Mm. So it most practices are run on a cash-based accounting system, and because of that, they're tracking more purchases, right? They're tracking as they're paying for something. Now, there's more nuances to that little statement as well, but not truly what was used in service. So on the P&L, it might say COGS or cost of goods sold, but it's not truly what happened in the service. So we end up, even in practices that do some inventory adjustments on the P&L at the end of the month, et cetera, it's very difficult to get that trued up. And you end up with this hybrid kind of P&L. So it's confusing.
Yeah. And I imagine for an owner, from a planning perspective, like, I imagine there are broader implications in terms of financial planning and management. Like, how do you see that?
I can't tell you how many times, if we look at, your reporting and production and P&L for 1 month, everybody's up in arms. Right? And I'm just like, well, one of the reasons is because of your cost of goods, and this number doesn't relate to what you actually brought in this month. So that number could represent something you purchased 3 months ago, because then you float terms into the mix. And so I'm always telling people, let's not focus on this 1 month when you're looking at your cost of goods. But honestly, people get scared. Owners get scared when they see that bottom line, because it'll affect the bottom line EBITDA and margin. And it's like you've got to look at a broader term or period of time in order to just see that spread out a little bit. But, if there's a way to manage that in a way where we could truly track what's used in the month, that would be real data.
Yeah.
And that's actually really difficult to do, right, for a normal practice, because you offer, 50 plus different services at times, right, especially as you're a growing practice. You have providers that have different preferences of what to use in those services. And so while we see some owners, before they, for example, come online with us, do a pretty decent job on, like, let's say the Botox and some of the injectables, which are much easier to relate to, right? I know what I sold, I know what I should have used. Once it comes to the more nuanced items, right, my back bar products, my consumables, right, my tips, like all of those things, it just breaks down and you start expensing it, and then you start to really get into trouble. We even see it on the operational side for us. So as a practice scales, right, oftentimes it shouldn't be the owner anymore, right, doing all of it, so they hand it over to somebody on the team. It's not their money, so they don't spend the same time searching for the best cost option anymore, right? So you get to see those costs get out of hand, right? The amount of times we walk into a practice and we're like, you're paying 3 times the amount than this product should have cost you, right? If you looked at where it should come from. And so one of the items we actually do is search for the best possible price, or have pre-negotiated rates with the practices that we, that we work with, a number of practices we work with.
Right.
That's actually amazing that you can do that, because I think most med spas or aesthetic practices are moving at such a pace. They're not taking the time to do that kind of research, especially when it comes to your medical supplies and things like that. And there are a lot of savings that can be had.
Huge, right? And you add all of them up in the end, and you get to a place where, like, I'm actually a little bit more profitable than I might have expected to be. And it starts to slip, slowly over time. The other thing that we do see a decent amount of, and it's kind of related to that, is then the time wasted on inventory, right? If I think about, like, again, a very small practice, doesn't take you much time to buy the couple of things that you need. When you think about a much larger practice, you have 20, 25 different vendors that you buy from. It's a lot of time you spend, going in. And if on top of that you then do the research, well, the amount you might have saved on the research as an owner is now the time that you kind of wasted that you could have spent productively with clients, for example, right? So it's like, no matter what you do, you're losing. That's a big problem. And that time is a real opportunity cost for these practices.
And think of as practices grow and the teams grow, you have all these individual preferences and or needs. And, when an esthetician said, I just sold the last X on the shelf and I have a client who wants to purchase it, now we're scrambling. So understanding how to get ahead of that instead of scrambling every week with 25 vendors, or more, is a really big thing. for
100%.
time and efficiency.
It's kind of that optimization piece, right? Of like running an optimal organization, because you sell the last one, you have a client in the door, that's lost revenue right there. But beyond lost revenue, it's also just a dissatisfied client. It's like, I came here, I drove here, right? I wanted something, I can't get it. That's bad, right? And what we then see as practices scale, what they do is they compensate in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So they go and they start overbuying, and then you lead to expirations. So then the owner is unhappy because they say I have all of this stuff sitting on the shelf, which I'm probably not going to sell before it expires. Now they pause on ordering and don't order the stuff that they're really selling anymore. So it starts to get into like this really bad place of just not running efficiently as it should. And you need a process and ideally a system in place, right, to run that for you in the end.
And even in that scenario that you outlined, not only do you have a disgruntled client who, couldn't pick up the retinol that they needed when they had their appointment, but also a provider who lost out on some sort of compensation if they're incentivized that way. And, I think in this industry, we both know that both of those things are extremely unideal. But to your point, it adds up. It's amazing when you think about an individual purchase of, say, like syringes or cotton swabs. Not optimizing feels okay, but I think what both of you are saying is that when you multiply that, it becomes a real line item that is a line item that often gets neglected. Because there's so many other sort of more splashy topics that I think folks spend a lot of time thinking and talking about.
100%. It's actually was surprising to us when we started the business, is that inventory or the procurement of the inventory is one of the, if not the largest line item on a location's P&L oftentimes, right? And we spend so much time trying to optimize for utilization of your staff members and the top funnel marketing and all of those other items where you look at it and you say, well, all these other items need to be optimized as well, but we're not doing any of that. The amount of practices we walk into that use spreadsheets and handwritten notes and sticky notes on screens, right? That's not adequate to ultimately the value that this contributes to your business anymore at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a particularly apt time to be talking about this because, I think as we look to the past few years in the industry continues to grow, which is phenomenal. However, we do also know that more and more shops opened. And so what that fostered was competition. And so, what we are encouraging many of our clients to do is, of course, new patients and patient generation, this is all very important, but really just optimizing the foundational operations of your business. I mean, that in many ways is what buyers are looking at. Like, are you running an efficient, well-oiled machine? And so, I think more and more folks are realizing that it's time to actually look inward and think about optimizing what I have.
Absolutely. Because you also reach a ceiling at one point, right? Even it's harder to reach a ceiling as a med spa, obviously, right? Which is great. That's why a lot of people go into the business. But even there, we have seen that shift where 2025 was really one of the first times at conferences and talking to clients where efficiency seemed to be kind of the buzzword more so than, growth, which it was definitely the years before. And that's good. It should be that way, right? You should be running a more efficient practice. And as you think about exiting, and you guys obviously deal with that a lot as well, right? You start to think about how reliable is it what I can give that buyer, right? How clear is it what I put out there, and what does that mean for my value then?
When I think about efficiency, I also think about provider efficiency and product usage, right? So that also affects, you might have someone, I'll use hydrofacial as an example, right? Who really loves all those serums and all the add-ons and all the things, and or just takes a longer time in that procedure. And so they're using more product over time. And, just those differences, slight nuances over time can really add up. Not to mention that there's provider preferences in product and obviously a wide variance in product pricing. And when practices really start to digest their margins and their profitability, they're getting to that level of looking at by provider profitability. And, that's when you can really understand, and not to take away a provider preference, but to perhaps do some coaching on, some other ways to approach those products and even out the flow.
I mean, they might not even know. Like
Correct.
there's a world where they have no idea that using
Correct.
this versus this is charging the practice 2x, right? And so just that knowledge might, in and of itself, can encourage them to change.
Transparency.
Yeah, we like transparency.
That's my name of the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because we actually, as a system, developed a report that shows exactly those items. It shows you by service your profitability and then breaks that further down by provider.
Yeah, that's great.
And I think it's really, really critical because it allows you to go back in and have real conversations, right, with your providers on this is what we need to do to be successful as a business, right? And these are the things that we're seeing in the data in the end. And it's hard to pull that together because even though it might not seem like a lot, but you add up all of the the serums and you add up all of the consumables that come with it, we see a wide spread between practices where an appointment in one might cost them 110 on a cost of goods sold basis, right, on kind of a product input basis. The exact same appointment is $75 in another one. When you start to look at it, right, and you're saying, wow, this is one is profitable, the other one is not profitable in that exact service in the end,
Yeah.
And most practices are looking at it from, if they're looking at it, more from a high level. It's like, well, I understand that my injectables have a higher cost of goods associated than my laser services, so I want to at least, spread out the service mix by provider and encourage that to grow, but they're not thinking down to that level.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons why you want to obviously extend your service mix, right? It's better to hold clients, right? To offer them a more breadth of services, right?
Yeah.
But you also need to look at it realistically. We've had clients who've looked at that report and said, I did not realize that this service isn't profitable to me.
Yeah.
And so if I can't justify it as a loss leader in order to get people in the door, which sometimes you can, but if I can't do that, then there's no business for me to offer that service in the end, right? If I add marketing costs and room cost and provider cost and so on to it.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes a hard realization because you start to understand where your actual profitability as a practice comes from, like deep down in the end. Yeah.
Yeah, with things like that, obviously we advise on service mix often, and what we're always weighing as advisors is, what's the incremental gain? Of course, service mix, expanding that's lovely, gives the patient more choice, but what's the operational complexity, and is that trade-off even worth it? And we do find, even from a training perspective, a sales perspective, what's nice about your platform, though, is I think it allows you to potentially broaden that service mix without bringing on the operational overhead that, we're always really cognizant of informing our clients about before they jump into a new thing. We talk about this a lot right now in the context, I think, of weight loss and wellness and that whole suite of new services that many folks are thinking about adding into their portfolio.
100%. It's actually funny you say that because when it comes to data provided, it's people like you guys that need access to real data about the practice to provide really, really good advice. Yep. And for some, broadening the service mix is the right answer. For others, it's cutting it back is the right answer, right? And that's what's always hard. What we see with this industry is, there's often advice that's kind of black or white, like this is the right way, this is the wrong way. That really depends in the end on each individual situation, and you need to understand your business to make sure you understand what the right answer for you might look like. And sometimes that's paying a provider more because they're valuable to your business, and sometimes that means, parting ways with them because they're not bringing in, the cost of good, the ultimate margin, right, that you wanted to expect from them. And so that's what makes it fun, right? At the same time, it also creates all of these complexities that as you grow a practice, you might not be prepared to really take on as an owner who doesn't know these things.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's wonderful you say it. It's clear to me that you dabbled in consulting yourself because to your point, this is something we face a lot where people will say, well, what's the best way to do this, or what's this, or what should I add, or how should I price this? And the beauty is there are a million ways to run a successful med spa practice, right? That's wonderful, and there's so many flavors, which means there are opportunities for more and more patients to find a provider and a practice that works for them. But to your point, there's no one size fits all.
For sure not. I was actually, last point on this one for me.
Yes, absolutely.
I was speaking to a client earlier, and I was being they were referencing certain benchmarks to me, and I know that we had conversations about this before as well. And I was saying, well, that benchmark is great, but in what context, right? Like, are you, for example, machine heavy? Are you not machine heavy,
Yeah.
right? Are you injectable heavy? Are you not? Are you retail heavy or not, right?
Yeah.
That influences your margin in the end. What market are you in? Where's your real estate located? All of these things. And so,
Totally.
this owner was, potentially unhappy about the margin in the end, right, that they were having. I was saying, well, but in your context, that might actually be a really good one, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so those nuances matter in the end.
Yeah, we'll often have sort of different benchmarks for like, are you in a tier 1 city, tier 2, tier 3? Are you just open your doors and you're in growth mode? Guess what? You're going to have to spend much more on marketing than if you are sort of self-sustaining mode that impacts how many of your patients are new versus recurring. There's just all of these layers, which is great. It makes their job a little bit more interesting.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's how it should be when you run a business, right?
Yeah.
Is to get excited about it.
Yeah.
We have actually seen that kind of the growth mode differences on our end quite a lot. So our system forecasts what needs to be ordered and then recommends that to the client, right? So the idea or the ideal scenario behind it is that a big part of your ordering is somewhat on autopilot, right? Where you know when you need to buy something and you get it recommended and you buy it. There's a huge difference between practices that are just starting because the forecasting is much harder, right? It's unpredictable. Some practices go crazy within the first couple of weeks and others need more time versus the ones that are getting into like a scaling mode, right? They've been maybe small for a bit. They get some great advice from for example, you guys, and suddenly, the business takes off, to the ones that are super large, super established, where there isn't much variability in it anymore.
Yeah.
And so what we actually done on our end as a reaction to that is you can, modify or set up your AI to fit with the stage that you're in as a business, right? And say, I'm entering a growth mode period. I need to be more protective of my inventory in the sense of I always need a little bit more on hand to make sure I don't stock out.
Right.
Versus I'm a very large practice. I just care about efficiency optimization right now. I'm okay if I'm a little low on something for a period as long as I see everything kind of scale back a little bit.
And that's a toggle like say an owner or user in your platform can do.
Yeah, they can do it on a recommendation basis, even on a category basis. Because that also matters, right? You come in, you say, hey, this practice has a retail issue. Like we have way too much retail on hand, it's all gonna go wrong, but we're always out of injectables.
Yeah.
Right? Like you need to have a nuance there on how much you want of what's stocked and so on. And those are the nuances in it that matter in order to really run a good practice. Yeah. And our best users are the ones who understand those settings and actually leverage them to accomplish those targets in the end.
Yeah. It's so interesting. You can see the way in which different folks are using your tool and how that manifests in their success overall. I'm sure there's a lot of wisdom that you all are gaining.
Yeah, I almost want to go back to, you said it earlier about the report that you give by provider, et cetera. And my brain is thinking about the people always, and the providers. And most of our providers are paid some sort of bonus or commission. And a lot of practices or owners want to deduct the cost of goods before paying that commission. And they set their compensation model based on that. But the problem is, in most practices, we're looking at it, it's so highly variable over time. I mean, it could vary from order to order when it comes to injectables, right? Most EMR or practice management systems don't update that actual cost on an every order basis, and without that, you're just giving a range.
Yep.
And the one thing that frustrates providers the most, or anyone really, think about it, in your compensation, is not being transparent about it. So there's that word again. But if they can't understand how their commission is actually being calculated and or don't trust that the number is truly accurate, I don't think a comp model based on that is a great one.
No, I agree. I mean, there's a lot that goes on in a business that you can 80-20. You can't 80-20 folks' comp, right? It's their livelihood, and that's something they will ask. Yeah. And rightly so, should understand what's going into those calculations.
Yeah.
There's also a component there where compensation is so difficult, where, right, how complex do you want to make it for yourself to try and understand that, right? Like we look at it, for example, on the injectable side of things, right, which is a big piece. Well, it's not just that you get instant rebates or quarterly rebates or samples, right? All of those things factor into ultimately your net cost of providing that service.
Yeah.
And so we as a system, for example, use a weighted average costing, right? Which is, one, it's compliant, right? And two, it gives you the actual weighted average cost of the products that you have on hand. And so it's great. Your retail rep stops by, your skincare rep stops by and gives you some free product. Fantastic, right? Well, if I'm allowed to sell it, I should be selling it, and that lowers my cost in the end, right, for those items. And that needs to be factored in. If you don't do that, you have a highly inflated cost of goods sold that doesn't really reflect reality in the end. And you don't incentivize people to actually take the actions that they should be taking.
Yeah.
And so those kind of nuances, but on an individual owner basis, it's almost impossible to do that yourself, right? What are you going to do?
100%.
Like have an Excel sheet of every single order ever placed, trying to sum it up by the end.
We've seen some of those.
Yeah.
We've created some of those. I'm afraid to say.
But I will say, I was just thinking about that comment, and you wonder if, worlds where you as a business owner know that all of your costs are being optimized and have that confidence across all of your providers, you actually might be able to use a less complicated compensation schema and just, even compensate on production, because you're not worried necessarily about a high variability between the costs of services between your providers. So there's these ancillary benefits that can pop up when you have that confidence.
Yeah, simplifying the model, right? Simplifying the model of what you're operating at is something that you need to do in order to then continue to grow and focus on the items that actually matter for growth. It's like, make your life a little bit easier. I had a fun story. There was a client who called us. This was probably last summer. And she told me, she's like, I'm at the beach right now, and I just ordered for all 5 of my locations in 15 minutes.
Oh, love that.
I was like, yes. And it wasn't the yes for like, oh, this is a cool quote or something, right? It was really for this is the purpose of that, where if you want to earn back quality of life, you can simplify your processes, make your practice easier to run. Great. You're going to be happier and doing a better job. And if you want to do that, not to work more, but to take more vacation, phenomenal, you deserve it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And a lot of them don't do that. They keep grinding out the same way that you were grinding when you were half the size, right? And it just gets harder and harder.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting. I mean, in many ways, the success of a owner, founder, is just their ability to sort of have a sustainable, like a personally sustainable business. And what I found in terms of what can cause anxiety for leaders, it's oftentimes less the problem that but actually the not knowing. So it's I don't know if I'm optimizing this. I don't know if this is in line with benchmarks. I don't know if my providers are actually, if some of them are maybe net negative or some of my services are net negative. So just having that, on the list of like things that are keeping you up at night, having that one taken off, that's one additional driver of success just in terms of sustainability of the job.
Mm-hmm. Well, and really, again, as practices grow, those owners typically would pass over the inventory management to someone, an operator in the practice, and again, not knowing. But back to your earlier comment, an operator, an operator that is working for you will never have the same passion or care or concern about the ordering cost or loss. I mean, that's the other thing, the counting process. And are we just counting and, well, this is off and this is off and this is off. I'm just going to update the numbers in the system and not find out why.
Shrinkage.
Yeah.
It's a huge problem. I mean, we always say if it's less than 3%, we are comfortable on it, right? Yeah. There's some level of what's left at the top of the syringe, and some things where you just want to give your client maybe a little bit extra. It's fine. 3% is okay. Start spiking above that. It starts to be a real concern. It's real cash out the door. We had a client for all of 2024. They had shrinkage of about 3.6% on injectables, which was within line, a little higher than I would like it to be, but it was within line. Come early 2025, it spiked up to 6.9%. Right. Number one, the system, we have a functionality which is called flag and resolution. So it essentially flags the things that are potentially wrong so that an owner can take action on it straight away, right, and can start digging in. This is not about being able to resolve mistakes immediately, because some of these things are operational processes internally, but about highlighting the things before they become, too big of an issue.
Right.
And then being able to dig in. In this case, they found the issue very quickly. There were issues around the checkout and issues around a new provider, and the way that, the extra follow-ups and so on were structured.
Right. I knew it was going to be follow-ups. I just knew it.
Have you seen that before?
I have. Sadly, we were realizing the product usage in one location was just going through the roof, and come to find out a provider was doing an automatic 2-week follow-up with a toxin for every single patient throughout their lifetime. Basically, she wanted to treat them, and so that was her relationship with them. And we found that out back in the day by digging through paper charts to see. She had charted it, but in paper, of course.
Yeah.
That's at least good that it was charted, right? Like
It
that's
was
already
charted.
better than
Right, exactly. Exactly. But it wasn't rung up.
Yeah. And it needs to be. By the
Ever.
way, even if it's rung up at $0,
Correct.
fine. At least I now can look at my
now
revenue.
I know the usage.
Yeah.
That's exactly it, right?
Yes.
And that's the marriage of operations with all of this, right? Is, understanding sort of operationally what's going on and then rectifying that problem. And then, ensuring your folks are compliant. Because, in this case, you could argue that they're just wanting to provide a really good service. They want to make sure they have a loyal client base. Like, again, there can be really genuine sentiment that goes into it. Doesn't necessarily mean that there's malintent. It just means that something needs to be caught and educated on.
As quickly as possible.
As quickly as possible. Yeah.
Yes.
There's the kind of, later on target as a company component to it as well, where you want to be able to record these things that are going on internally so that anyone who comes in knows where to take the next action, right? You can't tackle every problem immediately. And so, if shrinkage, for example, is a problem you have, you might say it's within bounds. I don't care enough. I'd rather focus on top line growth, for example. That's fine. But you need the data to then be able to say, okay, now let's go back and let's actually look at these issues and start taking actions on it. On our end, we, for example, show that as financial reports that show you shrinkage as an item, right? And the amount of things where clients get surprised after the fact, where it's not just that something actually is lost, but, for example, where the front desk rings up wrong items, right? Oh, Voluma was checked out as a Volbella, right? And this special thing was checked out as something else, right? It's not just a problem where your inventory is wrongly tracked. It's that your revenue data is not good enough to then, for example, inform your marketing strategy, or to have you guys come in and do like a quality of earnings analysis on that, right? Where it's just it's potentially wrong.
Yeah. It's a great point on the trickle down sort of impacts of, your system was able to flag something, was able to operationally fix it, and not fixing it would have implications for, say, marketing, valuation, sort of all of these other things down the line of a business. It's all interrelated.
All connected. That's it.
So let's talk about terms, payment terms, which are a headache in and of themselves sometimes. How does that factor into, how you're thinking about COGS and tracking and, again, sort of the smoothing or the spikiness of the costs of services delivered?
Yeah, again, it shows up on the P&L, and that's really truly what we're looking at as the financial data and performance of your company. And if you have 90-day terms, for example, and you pay for something 3 months later, well, maybe you bought it in December when things were really good, but in February it's a little bit slower. This affects your cash flow. I mean, at the end of the day, you might not have enough to really pay for that. Think about it as well, what you're paying in commission again during that period is not really relative to the product usage, et cetera. All of it, is, again, a trickle-down effect to your bottom line margin. So
I remember we had a client who wonderfully was using accrual-based accounting, but wasn't necessarily validating it with cash. And while the accrual financials looked really comfortable, we started to realize that cash was just ticking down.
Right.
And we were about to get in sort of a red zone spot. And so, it's the marriage of these two things. And 90 days is a really long time. I try to avoid those terms myself. because it's just really hard to plan as an owner.
Right. So those big bills, come due when you're not bringing in as much cash, it gets really hard to pay. So, the way that we've tried to help clients that have that, I mean, you want to take advantage of terms, obviously, but we'll just encourage them to start paying it off throughout and not wait for that big lump sum.
Right.
We often, when it comes to terms, actually look at it from like the owner-operator perspective and then more the kind of private equity group kind of investors perspective as kind of two different perspectives, where for an owner-operator, it is exactly that. It is I thought everything was great. I sold so many packages in December, and then I got a great deal on my purchases in December, and like everything was looking amazing. And come March, right, and we're a little slower, and I didn't put enough aside, and I also need to plan for paying taxes and so on and so forth, and we're not in a comfortable spot anymore with that. And for us here is we, for example, visualize that on the platform where the owner-operator can go in and knows exactly when is what coming due, right? How much do I need to have in order to make those payments? It's both as a total number, it's based on a graph, right? It's critical you need to see those items because you need to plan ahead. For the PE side of things, right? Like your accounts payable, right? Your cash flow forecast, like those are critical metrics that you report back to, you report it back to the board, you report it back to your partners, right? Yeah. And if those are wrong, that doesn't just create an issue on the cash flow side of things, because hopefully you have enough cash in the bank if you're buying a bunch of practices, but it creates more of a trust issue, right? Where it's like, are you able to operate this at scale, right? Are you able to do that? And so that's one where then, the trickle effect comes after the fact and you go wrong. The last time that we see, and this is not always the case, but some owners just forget. Right? And like we see this on kind of some of their previous accounts where you have all of these penalties, for example, built up, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, I was always late by a month. Well, that's great, but you just paid X% more on all of these items, plus interest payments and so on top. Or, you wait until your account gets blocked and then you're rushing to try and, make a payment in the moment and so on. And so I think it has no ill intent. We typically find it's purely a factor of like, I'm doing a million things at the same time. I can't keep this all in my head. Yeah. And so I'm paying the price both on a time basis and then on a financial basis as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And going back to your previous point on on the private equity side, we've seen this play out so many times where to your point, it's the trust issue where anytime a number is surfaced that then changes or is proven wrong, there's this nervousness that's how do I trust any of your numbers, take inventory out of it, right? Yep. And that can be just a really hard place, again, as someone operating a company, to be able to rectify.
Our early investor always said $1 off could mean $1 million in one direction and $1 million in the other direction. Mm. And so if it's not tying out, there's a problem, right? Because you really don't know where that comes from. That's absolutely critical. When we started actually as a business, one of the philosophies or one of the kind of ideas we had is not just can we provide a software platform, right? But can we provide a one-stop shop that does all of this stuff for you automatically so that you don't worry about it, right? There's a lot of software out there and a lot of them do parts of this, right? But having something where you can trust that what you buy equals what you received, equals what you paid, equals the financial statements that you ultimately put out there, right, that you're valued on or that you're reporting or presenting, right, and so on and so forth is absolutely critical. And that is more than just a software. That is ultimately a service, right? Just like you guys are providing a service to help them, clean up the processes in the end.
Yeah, and having a single source of truth.
That's it. It's critical. You need it long term, right? And if you're very small, you can get by without. But if you are looking to exit at one point, you're looking to do any of those things, you need a one-stop shop and a single source of truth.
Yeah.
Right. Most clients come to us when they're either trying to grow or scale, or they do have an exit in mind. And what that includes is, if you're small and you're wanting to grow and scale, what you need in place is systems. Yeah. And processes, and all of it comes down to really establishing protocols throughout all elements of your operations, right? But inventory is last thought of in many cases, and yet it is truly one of the biggest lines. I would say when clients come to us, like the biggest expense lines are labor and COGS, and we spend a lot of time focusing on labor
Yeah.
and, like you said, how to get them more productive. But if we would just spend a little more time,
Yeah.
you know, on inventory and managing all of the elements, you know, shrinkage, but theft occurs more often than we think. It's pretty scary, but it does happen. We have these beautiful waiting rooms that are not really well, you know, manned,
women.
right? Right. And so there's that. But one of my favorite stories about that, I'm going to ask you to tell, is the toilet paper story.
It truly is one of my favorite
It's
stories.
my
too.
favorite story.
I don't think I've heard the story.
It's good.
Multi-location client of ours, the largest location was using half the amount of toilet paper than the smallest location. So, you know, if you look at it from a kind of flow through of client perspective, it's by a factor of 4. You know, it was statistically significant. It was definitely not like, you know, somebody just wanted to go to a bathroom more.
Yeah,
you know?
You have a big drinker of
Exactly.
water.
And so this was flagged to the client by the system. We were actually not involved in that. And the client looked at it and said, let me restore the toilet paper. So they took it out of the bathroom. It was, I think, under the sink or something where it was stored earlier, put it in the back room. And so it was a little bit more annoying for the team because they had to now like replenish by walking a little bit extra back and forth. Within a month, usage went back to normal. Right? And like,
So what does that tell you? What does that tell
What
you?
conclusion can we draw?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because it seems so trivial. It's just toilet paper. Who cares, right? But you start adding that up, right? And you start adding up an extra order of like, you know, 24 rolls every 2 weeks, right? And you add that throughout the year and you think about, well, it's maybe the soap as well that's under the sink and my spray and, you know, what happened in the...
can be a slippery slope.
I think in aesthetics practices, right, the majority of our patients are women, and so we like to provide them with all of those things.
Absolutely.
And guess what? If you're out at home, it'd be an easy grab.
It would be an ezy grab, especially if there's a box
Yes.
underneath.
I like to come back more often, you know?
Yeah.
Well, in conclusion, that's a wild story, but it's such a telling
Yeah.
story,
Yeah.
right? Of again, just keeping an eye. It's when you're running a huge practice, and you know people do wild things. Just having a system that can catch them for you. There's no way you can be in the back. Like there's no way you can monitor that yourself. Right. It has to play out in the numbers in order to check.
Well, it's funny because when we think about, we report on the savings that we, you know, are generating for clients. One of the things that we are not reporting on because it's so difficult is the reduction in some of these activities by just everyone on the team knowing that somebody is watching. And this is not like a big brother, you know, kind of approach, but it's more we have eyes on this, right?
Yeah.
Like don't think that you can just get away with it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that one is a critical one where as you grow your business and you have maybe more staff turnover, trust is great and everybody should trust their people. I truly believe in that. I would give everyone on my team my social security card right now, right? But at the same time, that's probably foolish, right, to do. And you should have some level of control on top of it and know what's happening, you know, within your practice to then make good decisions.
I mean, it's that trust but verify. I mean, I'll say from a personal level, every penny Judy and I spend is absolutely tracked and
100%.
verified. So we are, you know, not asking folks to do what we are not currently doing. Yeah.
Critical. Yeah.
So, you know, say I'm a listener. And I'm listening to this and, you know, thinking about my practice and realizing that I don't probably have a grasp on things, which is absolutely fine and absolutely normal and probably the majority of practices. Like, where should I start?
That's a really good question. Number one for me is whether you talk to someone like us or you talk to someone like you guys, right? Talk to people who have seen this before, right? And have them understand your specific situation to then provide you a starting point or some level of good advice. I think that is absolutely critical, right? There are patterns, despite how, you know, different places can be. There is definitely a component here of some level of pattern recognition that's critical. I think the second thing is think about where you want to end up. Right? If you have a lifestyle business that provides you the cash flow you need to live the life you want and you're never looking to exit and things are running well, right? Maybe that isn't the place where you need to, you know, provide a ton of efficiency and so on and so forth. Maybe you're happy where you are, right? And that's great. But maybe you say, I want to take a further step back, right? Or you say, I want to sell at one point, or I want to grow, I want to build additional practices and locations, right? You need to understand where you want to go to understand where you should be spending your time and your effort on it. Obviously, from a selfish perspective, I think you should bring on a system. I do think that you should have some level of sophistication in place when it comes to things like inventory and track those appropriately, because the trickle effects are just beyond just the inventory side itself.
Right.
But that process of getting there, understanding that, I think is through conversation, through, consultants and experts in the space that can look at that. And, anyone can reach out to us, and we have plenty of clients where, we started off saying, you don't need us right now, right? That's fine. Like, come back in a year. These are the 5 tips we give you right now that you should be doing, right? And that's great, and that's a good conversation. And some others we say, it's time now.
Yeah. What would
I
you
would
say,
say,
Judy?
I would say data is king. And if you're not looking at your numbers and understanding, how it flows, then it's time to look. And without the data to show you, without the reporting, without any of that, or just allowing it to kind of flow the way it does, you're not really having true visibility on the profitability of your company. We think inventory is just operational, but it is truly ultimately financial. So that's where I'd start.
Yeah. It's interesting. We were chatting before we were recording this podcast, and one of the things we were talking about is how this industry, compared to other, say, industries where private equity is entering the space and potentially buying and rolling up practices, is that the percentage of your revenue that goes into just the cost of labor and also your COGS operating your business is astronomically higher than it is in really most businesses. And so what that means is, like, in many ways, this should be at the very top of your list of things to look at, because it's a fundamental driver and a controllable driver of your business. There's so much that we can't control, and this one is ultimately controllable.
One of our clients, the CEO of that client, I had a conversation with him, and he said he's number one brilliant, but also just understands kind of prioritizing appropriately. And he was saying there's things that I can easily control and things that I can't control at all, right? Controlling providers is difficult, right? Like controlling the teams and so on, that's hard. Controlling inventory seems really hard, but once you have the right systems process in place, it's actually not that difficult anymore. Right? And so if you think about low-hanging fruit, it's exactly that. It's a big piece of your revenue, right, that's going out the door, and it's so untapped. And as a practice, right, whether you are a private equity group, you're corporate, or you are an individual kind of owner-operator, taking that low-hanging fruit also makes you more attractive as a business, because it's that thing that maybe some others haven't done yet. It sets you apart a bit.
Absolutely. This is framing this conversation as this is an exciting opportunity, not a scary thing that folks might be doing wrong, right? This is great. I always think it's like so wonderful to understand there are additional levers to optimize your business that you maybe weren't even aware of and could be lighter lift than you think. So for our listeners, if there's sort of one takeaway that you would want them to walk away from this conversation with, other than all of the wisdom you've shared already, what would it be?
I think I would say that strong revenue doesn't always equal strong performance. I'm kind of hearkening back a little bit to what products we use, what we choose, how we're maximizing our payment terms or benefits from our vendors. Building those vendor relationships are really key to this as well. And then really understanding your numbers, how you're tracking, and create a system. It seems simple, but it's so important to get the right system in place and get the people trained and understanding the value of what's behind tracking that inventory. And if you are large enough or it's important enough to you to hire and have a system like this. I mean, I love this system because I deal with inventory problems with practices every single day. So having the data and a tool and a system to just do that for you essentially is amazing.
Number one, I would say listen to Judy.
I say that a lot.
Beyond that, we as a company, we enter the space because we're fundamentally excited about where it's going, right? Like this is an exciting time, right? It's an exciting space. It's only starting in my mind, right? We're at the forefront of really what this can do. And I think there's a component here where all of us need to pull into the right direction and level up the way we do things, right? Mm-hmm. Level up to the potential of the space, and that touches every single aspect of that business. To us, that means better technology, right? Embracing the tools that are out there and ultimately driving performance through data and through processes and through actually making good decisions in your business. I think if everyone, or at least the key people in the space, do that, the future is incredibly bright, right?
Yeah.
And so we are building in this space in order to provide some of these tools. We hope that more people build in this space, and we certainly hope that there's more practices, that kind of understand the opportunities they have and where they can go with the tools and with the space as a whole.
I love that. I think, at Skytale, one of our beliefs is that this industry, we can sort of all rise together. And for us, we're always searching for tools that will make our clients' lives better and businesses stronger. And so it's really exciting to have yet another tool in our toolkit that we can work with our practices with. So thank you. Thank you both. This is a great conversation and excited for more.
More to come. Thank you for having me. Really great what you guys are doing and excited for the next one.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks.